Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. As longtime listeners know, I'm a huge fan of Gretchen Rubin and her work. And we've talked about her many times and even had her on the podcast to talk about her book, Happier at Home. Gretchen created a personality framework that I fell in love with several years ago. Even before we started the podcast, I was already nagging and begging my friends to take the quiz, and it's about the Four Tendencies. And a listener requested that we do an episode where Julie, Mindy, and I kind of talk about what tendency we fit into and maybe how it's helped us in our life. And so today is the day for that discussion. I think this person asked like over a year ago. So I hope you're still listening.
Your dreams are finally coming true.
And for listeners that aren't familiar with the Four Tendencies, it's a framework. She has a quiz. There's a personality test. It's short. It's maybe like 12 questions that you can take online, and we'll link to that in our show notes. But it's useful because it answers the question, how do I get people, including myself, to do what I want them to do? And it's a narrow personality test. It's not going to tell you everything about your personality, but it is going to tell you two things: how readily you meet inner expectations and how readily you meet outer expectations. Inner expectations, an example would be like, can you keep a New Year's resolution? That's something you've made for yourself. How good are you at keeping an expectation that you have for yourself? And then outer expectations are things that other people expect from you. An example might be a friend asking you to go to the gym with them to exercise together. And if you tend to do things because other people asked you to, especially when you don't really want to, then you readily meet outer expectations. For listeners that are listening that haven't taken the personality test, if you don't want to stop right now and go to our show notes, you can ask yourself 4 different statements to kind of get an idea so that you know maybe where you are during our discussion. And there's 4 different tendencies. There's upholder, questioner, obliger, and rebel. An upholder, they might say to themselves, I love routines and people think I'm extremely disciplined. Questioners, people might say about you, or you might say about yourself, I love researching and people sometimes say that I ask why too much. For an obliger, they might say to themselves, I put others ahead of me and I value harmony in relationships. And for the rebel, they're going to say to themselves, I value freedom and choice. I do what I want to do when I want to do it. So hopefully that gives you a tiny little insight into what we're going to talk about today. Julie and I are pretty confident that we know what we are, but Mindy is like, she's our wild card today, and she's never been able to figure out what she is, so she's going to have the reveal on Midlife Matters. But before she reveals it, I just wanted to see, like, what do you guys think about the 4 tendencies? I'm sure I badgered you about this before we ever even started the podcast, but what did you think about it?
I was going to say when Marie said a long time ago she was begging and nagging people to take the test, I was like, I can vouch for that.
Yeah, me too. Raising, yep.
We were at a lake day having fun on a lake, and we all had to take this quiz during lunch.
Yeah, that's so funny. It's only 12 questions, Julie. I mean, why wouldn't you want to know?
Right.
I still remember that day.
I will say that I balk against personality tests because I hate the whole idea of like, they don't know me. They can't put me in a box. Like,
right.
You know, because you don't tend to like follow every little thing that they say about you. But I do find this one very fascinating because it is more of a broad. It doesn't put you in a box. It just tells you what motivates you really, what kind of like it is a tendency. It's not just a strict, this is how you act, but it kind of tells you why you act that way. And it really does help you learn how to get along with other people or how to motivate them. It's great for families, and I don't know, I guess it would be great on the work, on the job too.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's been fascinating. And I lived in Pennsylvania when Marie first started talking about this, and I had a lot of time driving from Pennsylvania to Tennessee on those trips, and I was by myself. And so I did a deep dive years ago into listening to Gretchen Rubin's podcasts, and it was fascinating. And so this topic is coming now years later, which is interesting, I think, because when I took the quiz before. I got one thing.
Oh.
Took it this time. I got something else.
Okay.
And so Mindy's just confused about the whole thing. I am fascinated by it. And I had all of my family take it. So we're going to talk about all this. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say what percentage of people are certain things. And then, Mindy, I want you to tell us what you are. Okay. So according to an article on the internet, the distribution of tendencies is 41% of people are obligers, 24% of people are questioners, 19% of people are upholders, and 17% of people are rebels. All right, Mindy, what do you think you are?
Questioner.
Really? Okay. I was not going to peg that.
I wouldn't have, because I'm not the total researcher. Like, forgive me, but I feel like that's Marie.
It is.
Like, but as I listened to her talk about it, and I was like, I respect Marie. I know that she has done the research, so I don't have to. But I do ask her, like, she's actually my research when I say, like, what dishwasher should I buy, Marie? Because I know she's done all the research. I'm like, okay, I'm good with that.
You just outsourced it.
One of the other things, so I think that there's some things that are fully you and some things that are like, okay, not so much, that I could see having like questioners that are different with different personalities, like what if one questioner has ADHD, that would be different than one that doesn't. So I think that there's, there's different aspects,
different degrees of intensity of each one
to it. Yes. But I think overall, especially like one of the things my kids are annoyed by most is that I ask too many questions.
Oh.
I was like, oh, there's a hint. And then I thought back to childhood, because Gretchen Rubin does talk about like when you were a child, and that there were a lot of discussions. And I would say, was that manipulation or was that questioning? I don't know, but I don't know. So I was surprised. Also still researching and trying to figure out, like, is this, but that I did feel like it was more closely to who I am.
Okay. So what did you get the first time? I'm just curious.
The first time I got Obliger.
Okay.
And then I actually thought I was a rebel.
So yeah.
I'd like to be an upholder. I'm telling you.
Well, the thing is, and I want to say this up front, is no tendency is better than the other. Like Gretchen says that over and over again. The way that tendencies can be bad is if you don't know the tools to put in place to get you to meet both inner and outer expectations. But any tendency can be successful depending on whether you utilize those tools or not.
Yeah, because they all have strengths and weaknesses. So it's knowing how to capitalize on the strengths and work around your weaknesses. Yeah.
I would say one example before I really want to hear about you guys, but I will say one thing about me that was a major light bulb moment with being a questioner. And that is how I respond, to expectations, is the way that I was finally able to find success with weight loss. And when I thought about this scenario, this made a lot of sense. It took me hiring a trainer for me to be able to pepper her with questions the entire time we were working out together. The entire hour that I paid for her attention.
Right.
I needed to be, I asked a million questions every time I was with Charlotte. And she was answering my questions, and I was looking for all the reasons why and how and all of that. And that's how I finally found success with weight loss and with my health journey, was having the opportunity to ask Charlotte a million questions. And when I realized that, when I thought about that being a major life turning moment for me and how I've been able to keep off the weight and stay healthy and maintain, it's that ability to be able to seek out information that then I'm like, well, that makes sense. That's logical. Why would I not do that?
Right.
Well, good, Mindy. I'm glad that you found your... Okay, so anyways, let's kind of talk about our types, and then we want to get into how our types work within our family. Julie, you haven't told us what your type is. So Mindy and I are both questioners. So what type are you?
All right, I'm an obliger.
No, Julie, I would have totally pegged you as an upholder.
Okay, that's interesting, and I'm going to talk about that because I did too.
Oh, okay.
I took the test multiple times. And, the questions are kind of easy to see, like, what they're going towards.
Yes.
So you could, but, because I thought, well, I'll get into that later.
Okay.
But I'm an obliger, and our motto is, you can count on me, and I'm counting on you to count on me.
I love that motto.
We more easily meet outer expectations, but sometimes we resist or struggle to meet inner. And that doesn't mean we never meet inner. It's just those are harder for us. So we need outer accountability, even for things that we want to do. So like if I want to read more books, I'm going to join a book club. If I want to exercise more, I hire a trainer. If I want to know more about the Bible, then I'm going to join a Bible study. Like I need that external accountability for me to stick with it. And like some of the things that make me feel accountable are deadlines, working under pressure, somebody expecting me to show up, like they depend on me. Even kind of being a role model, like that kind of subtly plays into it. Like I know people are watching or whatever, or like paying for something like my trainer, I've already paid for that. So I'm going to go, So yeah. And I'll talk a little bit later about why kind of had to weed out, like if you think you're one thing, but maybe you're not.
Yeah. All right. Before we go on, Mindy, why don't you describe a questioner then?
So the questioner questions all expectations, and they respond to expectations only if they conclude that it makes sense.
Yes, which is the biggest key.
If it makes sense, yeah. If it makes sense, they're going to do it.
Right.
But pretty much anything you ask them to do, they're going to say, should I do that?
Right.
So they're not as concerned about meeting outward expectations. But pretty much like once you figure out what your inner expectation is, and you've done the research to figure out why you would do it, then you typically do that forever. Like you will continue to do the same thing to meet that inner expectation all the time, because you've already done all the research why you should do that. So why wouldn't you?
Yeah. It seems obvious to the questioner.
Well, and so basically, like, say somebody says you need to show up at, 20 minutes before this starts. That's an outer expectation. So once it makes sense to the questioner, like they want to know why I've got to be there, then they've really just made that, then they're willing to make that an inner expectation. So that's to keep in mind that it's all about inner and outer expectations.
Right.
And that plays into how I parent. I always tell the why. I always say, I need you to do this because this, I'm already trying to talk them into doing it my way.
Yeah. Okay. So for upholders, none of us are an upholder, but we are going to have listeners that are. Their motto is discipline is my freedom. And upholders readily meet inner and outer expectations. They're highly disciplined. They love schedules, rules, and routines. I mean, they're pretty much like, if they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. If you ask them to do something, they're going to do it. It's just easy peasy. They're going to meet both what they want to do personally and what someone from the outside wants them to do. And on the surface, upholders look like, oh, everybody wants to be an upholder. But again, every tendency has its weakness. Okay, and then just a quick description of rebels. Rebels' motto is, you can't make me, and neither can I. So rebels do what they want to do in their own way on their own time. If someone tells them to do the exact same thing, they will resist. They don't even want to tell themselves to do something. They prefer to act from freedom, choice, and self-expression. So on the surface, that might seem like, well, how did they ever get anything done? But I have a rebel child, and I'll talk later about just how freeing it was to find out that's what she was. And as a questioner, it just really took away a lot of points of conflict for us. So
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah, I remember you
anyways.
talking about that when that came to light for you. It really changed the way you
Yes.
parented
Mm-hmm.
in that situation.
For sure. For sure. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about ourselves. So we've said what type we are. Let's talk about what is hard about that type. Julie, you mentioned that it's hard for you to do things if you don't have outside accountability. Do you want to go into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I had a big light bulb moment when I was studying this because it is hard for me to do things by myself. Now, it's not that I cannot be by myself. I can. But I've been thinking a lot about this lately, this aspect of my life, especially with John's diagnosis and my future, like being alone. And I just hate the feeling of being alone. And I think that this might be the key. Like obligers need groups and teams and coaches to kind of help them accomplish things. And like John is my biggest teammate and my coach and my cheerleader, And so I'm afraid that if I'm alone, I'll never do anything. So I need to be a part of a group doing something. I don't just necessarily branch out on my own and start something. You know what I mean? I need to, a lot of times I need to be asked and I need it to be definitive and specific, but it's not like I never do anything that I want to do. That's
sure.
But that, I don't know, that was just kind of a light bulb moment for me about maybe why I fear being alone is because that I feel like that outer accountability and expectation is going to go away. And some things that frustrate me is like with other tendencies, it seems like their weaknesses might kind of fall on the people around them. But with obligers, it seems like our weaknesses fall back on us. Like we feel bad about ourselves. Like a questioner might think badly of a rebel. Like, why don't you see it my way? But my weaknesses kind of fall back on me and I get down on myself. Like if I can't meet an inner expectation, especially if it's something I really want to do, it makes you kind of feel bad. You can kind of get depressed. Like, why can't I do that? Like after working out with my trainer for almost 9 years now, I might think, you know what? Why do I keep paying her all this money? I mean, I know what to do. So logically you'd say, well, why don't you just quit that and do it on your own? But I know if I quit paying my trainer, I'm done. There will be no more exercise, no more weightlifting, no more strength training, So that's just something I know about myself. And instead of getting down about that, it's just, I need that accountability.
It's good to recognize that.
Yeah. So that was one of the things that when I thought I would have tested as an upholder because I feel like I'm pretty highly productive. I get things done. I'm kind of a high achiever, like I want to achieve big things, but I have lots of to-do lists. I have calendars and I thrive on routine. And I think what I figured out was those are just my ways of adding my own accountability. That's kind of the way my inner expectations become outer. Like they're out there on paper for the world to see, or I've told somebody about them, or, so that kind of is enough for me to see it on paper. Like, okay, that's my outer expectation. So I'm going to do it. So that's why I even have to write down something fun to do, like go on a hike today, like, because then I'll do it.
That's so interesting.
Because it's weird. You would think, if it's something you want to do, you'll do it, but not necessarily. I still need that accountability.
So you're a pretty healthy obliger because on your own, you've already figured out ways to hold yourself accountable, paying a trainer, to-do lists, holding yourself accountable with a friend. Like you already intuitively, and maybe that's why you look like an upholder.
Right. Because even to myself, I thought I did, but I think I've just figured out ways to
which is
build
the
in that
total
accountability.
goal. I mean, that's the goal. Yeah. No, I love that, Julie. That's really good. All right. Well, Mindy, what is hard and frustrating for you, or what do you recognize now that you're a questioner?
One scenario that came to mind was she talks about analysis paralysis for the questioner, that sometimes you do so much research, you can't possibly make a decision. And so I thought of a scenario where this rings so true in my life. And I wished I could have talked to you, Marie, about this situation at the time. but I really felt like to be a good mom, I should homeschool.
Oh.
And where I'm going with this is I was invited to a homeschool conference by a friend who was a homeschool mom. We went to this conference all day. We left the conference. She was so excited. She was pumped up. She was ready. She had been given all these tools to be a great homeschool mom. And she looked at me. She's like, how about you? I'm like, I am so discouraged right now. I am so overwhelmed because they showed curriculum and there were so many options of curriculum. I was just like mystified as to which was the best one. And it really kept me up at night. I was completely stressed about it. I was researching. I couldn't do enough research. I couldn't figure out what the best way to do math was because some people said this was the best one. Some people said this was the best one. And I was like, I'm going to mess up my kids. I can't do this. I can't. And this was one of the linchpins that was like the death knell. I was done. I could not figure out the right curriculum. So I did not homeschool because I seriously stressed about it so much. I never could make, to me, the right decision. There was never a right way.
I can so relate to that. And she actually talks about that some questioners, they will avoid scenarios that they know intuitively would drive them nuts. Like, I don't think I would ever build a house because for me, that would just be the death because I would have to research which doorknobs to choose just as much as I would have to research which faucet, just as much as what is the perfect height for the ceiling, what molding, what flooring. Like, I need to have my choices limited by someone else, or I will never be able to make a decision.
So you need to shop at Aldi versus
Yes,
Kroger.
I really do.
Yes.
I really do because I would drive myself nuts. Like the perfect scenario if I was going to have a new house would be, okay, all of these big things have already been built and decided. You get to pick out 5 things. I could do that.
Or they say, here are 5 doorknobs, not just endless doorknobs.
Right.
I could do that.
Yes, but you can't just give me unlimited choices. That's way too overwhelming. How am I going to pick the best one?
I understand.
So I would say analysis paralysis is a big downfall. And then I would say that arbitrary rules are a big downfall for me. And so, like in her example, she says, if the fitting room says you can only have 6 items, I completely ignore rules like that. Why? Who do you care? I'm not going to steal anything. I'm not going to go out 10 times. I'm taking in 8, 9, whatever. Like, I'm not even going to think about only taking in 6. And this kind of thing is frustrating sometimes for my husband, who is an obliger, Julie. And so we were flying home from Yosemite last week, and they said, oh, there's turbulence. We're going to put the don't go to the bathroom sign on. And so after like 20 minutes, or I don't even know how long it'd been, but I decided that I wanted to go to the bathroom. And I said to Steve, can I get out? Because I'm going to go to the bathroom. He goes, you can't go to the bathroom. The stay seated light's on. I said, so what? I said, it's been on for a while and I have to go to the bathroom. He goes, yeah, but they want you to stay seated. I said, well, what are they going to do if I get up and go to the bathroom? Well, nothing. They can't do anything. I said, then I'm going to the bathroom. Like, they've already had the stay seated light on for what I consider a reasonable amount of time. They can't just make us not go to the bathroom the whole flight. I'm getting up. But for him, he would just stay seated, until it was like the last minute emergency. And I'm thinking, I don't actually feel any turbulence right now. They may have forgot about this light. I don't know. I'm going.
Right.
And so I went and came back. And I know that those kind of things are annoying for him because I know what he thinks.
Yeah.
She thinks the rules don't apply to her. And that's a lot of what people will think about questions. It's not that I don't think the rules don't apply to me, but that's a stupid rule. Like, no, that shouldn't apply to anyone.
That's so funny because I'm married to a questioner, so we're the opposite. So I get that.
So, yes. Mindy, has anyone ever said that about you, that you don't think the rules apply to you?
It depends on the scenario. And yes, they have, because a lot of times my family, if there's something that's happening and I'm like, oh, well, we don't have to do that because the rules have changed in my mind, like for you, oh, it's been on long enough. I followed their rule. It doesn't make sense anymore.
Right.
But I feel like even in my marriage, there's some things that just don't come to mind for other people, that the questioner is like, there's another way. You find another way. Even when you've been told this is the only way, or these are the options, you could think of a third option that maybe nobody has. And then you do make people uncomfortable because they're like, Mom, you're going to embarrass us. I'm like, it's okay.
Right.
It's okay. Like, what's going to happen? That's my question. What's going to happen?
They might not know about this. They might appreciate me pointing this loophole out.
Yes. When everyone is following one line, I'm like, why wouldn't you go on this side of the railing? Right. And so I go on the other side of the railing. Like if you're walking up a long staircase and people will naturally fall in the line, I'm like, why are they doing that? This whole side is open. Yeah.
And even if at the top it narrows, someone's going to let me in. I mean, they're not just going to make me stay out.
Yeah.
That's the questioner thinking.
It's okay. And that's the question that I ask. Like, what's the worst that could happen? When that goes through my mind, like everyone's in trouble because
they're ready to tell you the worst that could happen.
What are they going to do? Fire me? I mean, that has gone through my mind so many. I'm like, what are they going to do? They need me. Probably not a good question to ask.
No. All right. Well, what is something that comes easy to you with your tendency that might not come as easy to other tendencies? So being an obliger, Julie, I just feel like everyone must love you because you're never making anyone mad.
Yeah, I guess you could say I'm fairly easy to get along with, harmonious. Like I like peace in relationships, reliable, dependable. Like if you ask me to do something, and I'm not saying that I say yes to everything everybody asks me to do, but if you do ask me and I do agree, then I'm just going to do it. Mm-hmm. Like I want to know what's expected so I can do it, so I can complete it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, like when you asked me to do the podcast, I thought about it, took it seriously, and I agreed to it. So I don't, you don't have to necessarily wonder if I'm going to show up one day or if I'm going to be here. But so like just being dependent on is enough accountability for me. Like,
you are loyal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that kind of goes along with Enneagram 6. That's the kind of the key word for Enneagram 6 is loyal. So,
okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would you say is easy for you or comes easily being a questioner, Mindy?
I think that I'm consistent. Once I have made or determined the right decision, then I'm consistent and not much moves me. Bryce calls me a robot when it comes to my routine because I've determined the best routine for me. And that's what I'm going to do. He knows what I'm going to do every morning, every night. Like, also, I think that, and I want to hear you talk about this too, Marie, because my research actually is mostly talking to people. So when I'm not necessarily looking up research on the internet or looking at books, but Bryce is someone that I trust and I think highly of him. So he helps me with my analysis paralysis and I trust him. So then I can let it go. But I think having people in your life that you do just rely on, like Marie, anything you told me, I would trust it. If Julie had a plan for how to travel, I would just do that. I mean, I really would just follow whatever Julie told me to do in Switzerland.
Right.
So I think that
and I love being dependent on. So it's a win-win.
It's just so good. It's so good. At the same time, like, I love being able to be creative, like not necessarily think inside the box. You can think outside the box. You can have some spontaneity, within, what you've determined is good, fun, acceptable, whatever.
And that's great because sometimes I don't question anything. It's like, nope, this is the way it's always been done. This is the way I've always done it. This is the way my family did it, and sometimes it takes somebody saying, well, what about this?
Yeah.
Which comes so naturally to you. but not to everyone else.
Yeah. Because I'm married to an obliger, I sometimes compare myself against the obliger because in her book, she has like concentric circles, but the obliger and the questioner never overlap. The obliger can overlap with the upholder and rebel, and the questioner can overlap with the upholder and rebel, but the obliger and questioner never meet. And so, like, I kind of feel like they're kind of opposites in some ways. And like, what comes easy or what is easy for me is to draw a line and be like, no, I don't have a trouble with like, no, I'm going to do this self-care thing for myself and I'm not going to feel guilty about it. Or no, I'm not going to do that. And I don't care that I've made someone mad or uncomfortable. No, that's not for me. I'm not going to do it. Or whereas my obliger husband does have a problem drawing a boundary because they're so obliging. Whatever expectation someone has, they're willing to go along with it. He might hate the expectation. Like we might both be asked to do something and he might hate that he has to do it, but he'll still go ahead and do it. Whereas I'll be like, no, I don't want to do that expectation. I'm not doing it. And so it's not that the obliger likes every expectation. It's just that they have a harder time saying no to it.
Well, Marie, I have to ask you this because you've done so much more research on this than me. And I was really trying to grapple with, I would call myself a recovering people pleaser. So I don't feel like you necessarily would say that about yourself. So
I wish I could say I'm a people pleaser. It sounds so nice to say you're a people pleaser.
It does.
And it's not that I never please people or I won't do something to please someone.
Right.
But I won't go too far off what I think is right for me to please someone.
Yes. That's where I've come to terms in my mind where I'm okay with disappointing someone if I feel like it's better for even them.
Right.
Like they may not understand my altruistic reasons and, you know, but I did really struggle with the stress of not pleasing people. You know, that would stress me out. Now I'm okay separating myself and saying it's just not something that's important to me and I'm going to let it go. And then I can let it go. But it was a decision. I don't know. It was still a struggle.
Yeah. And there's so many different personalities and so many things that go into each tendency. Like, I don't think that it's that questioners are never people pleasers. You know, like, I think this is really just all about expectations.
Well, and you can't always look at people pleasing as a healthy thing either.
Right.
You know, that's not always, it sound like you said, it sounds good, but that's not always healthy.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, what do you have difficulty understanding about the other tendencies? I kind of alluded to the fact that I feel like I can understand upholder because I do kind of tip to upholder. Questioners can tip to upholders. Like if I agree with a rule, you better believe I'll be following it and I'll be telling everyone else to follow it and I'll be its biggest champion. If I don't agree with a rule, that's when I'm just not going to do it. But I'm not a rebel. I don't tip rebel and say like, oh, because you said I have to do something, I won't do it. That's not my personality. It's just that I have to agree that I think the rule is necessary. But like the obliger, I guess what I don't understand maybe is about obligers. I don't understand. And Steve is the biggest one in my life. And I've seen it time and time again. He'll agree to so many things on his plate. And then he will either be mad or resentful and blow up because there's too many people depending on him. And from my side of the coin, I'm like, well, then why'd you say yes to all that? Like, I can't understand that about obligers.
Well, that's a common thing. She talks about obliger rebellion. That one day you'll just say enough is enough and I'm done. And you'll, like in an extreme cases, somebody might walk away, you know, from a friendship or a relationship or a job or whatever. Like they just have, you know, not controlled that enough. And then they just get to a point where they can't handle it, you know? So that's a big downfall of obligers. Or something to watch out for, you know?
Yeah, for sure. What do you have difficulty understanding about the other tendencies, Julie?
I had fun with this question. So I think I'm married to a questioner. I've not had my family take these tests, but early in our marriage, when we would disagree, I always felt like John was trying to undermine my point of view or my reasoning behind something. And I've learned that because he'll say, like recently it wasn't even, we weren't even disagreeing about something that involved him. It was a decision I was going to make. And he would say, well, why are you going to do it that way? Just because, like I don't want to go through all my reasons, and because I felt like I was having to justify it to him. But then I was able to think through it and give him some reasons, and he was like, oh wow, that makes so much sense to me. Like I think that's a great idea. And it kind of totally changed his perspective, and I just loved that. Like he wasn't being an ogre. He wasn't trying to undermine anything. He just wanted to know me and know why I think this way, I wasn't really having to justify it. He just really wants to understand people and understand situations. And that can be tricky. Like that can look one way and it's really not bad. It's a good thing, like I appreciate that about him now. And now when I'm making a decision, I know ahead of time, I need to think through what he's going to ask. And it makes me think, okay, why am I doing this versus this? Or, what made me lean toward this? Like it makes me ask myself those questions kind of ahead of time. So, and one other thing I thought with an upholder that I know, it kind of seems like upholders can be very inflexible and not a lot of fun because they're going to stick to this habit no matter what. And it's like, where most people would say, it's your birthday or it's Christmas, have this cake, or let's go get ice cream. Oh no, I don't need ice cream. It's like, good grief, can you not just have fun? But something that Gretchen pointed out, because I think Gretchen is an upholder and her sister is not, is that wouldn't be fun for them to break that habit. It seems like it would be fun to everyone else. Like, why don't you just have fun and do that? But that wouldn't even be fun. And so to have to realize that about them, because sometimes they, it kind of seems like they miss out on a lot of things because they're so disciplined.
Yes. I have a son that tested as an upholder. And I thought he was going to be a questioner because he does a ton of research for anything that happens. But he took the quiz and immediately texted me, I'm an upholder, discipline is my freedom. And I thought, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. And he is the kind of person that won't have cake on his birthday. Like he'll make a rule for himself, and like we'll be on vacation and I go to bed at 9 every night. Okay, but it's vacation. Like upholders just do their stuff no matter what, and there's no point in working yourself up into a frenzy. Like as a questioner, you might be like, but why? That doesn't make sense. We're on vacation. Don't bother. Like they're going to do what they want to do, and it's not personal.
Right. Well,
and it's not like they're holding back from fun if they don't think that might be fun. Yeah.
Well, I have a son and a son-in-law that both tested as upholders, and these two individuals are very different. And I was shocked that the son that, tested as an upholder did. I thought he was a rebel all day long. I would have told you he was a rebel. Yes, because he does that. Now because I was like, okay, well, he does meet inner expectations, but I didn't think he met outer expectations. Like I always saw him. And then I was like, well, maybe he's a questioner, as like, well, I mean, do I really have to do that? But in other situations, like outside of our family, I see him like killing it. Like he played football and the coach would say, you need to be here at 5:30 a.m. Grant would be like, I don't understand why everybody's late. Like the coach said, be there at 5:30 a.m. He was like, I don't care if we had practice till midnight. You're there at 5:30 a.m. And it's just like, he's unmovable. And so that unmovable part of it, I thought was rebel.
Yeah.
Also, okay, so here's something, and I want my husband to test again. My husband, who is highly successful, is a rebel.
Oh, interesting.
And he doesn't meet a lot of the things that she said, though he felt like he answered the questions correctly. So I've been listening to a lot of rebel conversations with Gretchen Rubin. You go back, like you can deep dive into this. It's so fun because then they have listener questions and how people, with different tendencies responded in the home and at work and things like that. And so Bryce is highly successful. He's highly committed. He loves New Year's resolutions. That's one of the things that she says. How do you feel about New Year's resolutions? Can kind of help give you an idea as to what tendency you are. And so Bryce happens to love New Year's resolutions and meets them. And so I'm not sure what about him decides to do that, but he has figured out somehow to meet at the same time. You can't put him in a box. Like, he is very creative. He very much meets expectations, but they're his, but he doesn't know how he does that.
Well, I think in my research about rebels, it's all back to their identity. So for Bryce's identity, it could be, I'm a successful person who makes resolutions and sticks to them. And that's how my daughter is. Like, I'm a mom who does X. So she does X, Y, or Z. Or I'm a wedding photographer who shows up on time, gets my stuff done, has a good reputation. Like, if they decide that something is their identity, then they're fine with meeting all the expectations that come around it. And probably he just has a really good idea of what he wants to be identified as.
Oh, like he's the most successful person I know about meeting what he's determined as what he needs to do. And then I think about his family of origin, and he, by being successful in, I'll say, marriage, family, work, he rebelled against how he was raised.
Yeah.
So I could almost see then that that's why his success is actually opposite of how he was raised. And from an early age, he decided, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do this. And he did. As soon as he could drive. I mean, he started killing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's important to remember too, like, we all respond to logic, not just a questioner. We all meet expectations if they're important enough to us. And we all want freedom of choice, not just rebels. Like, like, just to remember, like, don't box people in. It's not hard and fast,
Right.
Well, if someone wants to get you to do something, what should they do? So
why?
For Mindy and I, you better tell us why. If your idea looks stupid, we're not doing it. But if you tell us why it's actually making sense, then we might buy in.
That's so exhausting.
Even if it's just to have fun, I can buy into that.
Right. Yeah. So you better tell us why. Julie, for someone to get you to do something, what do they need to do?
Give me specific, concrete plans. Like, don't just say, hey, we should get together soon, or what, like, I need to know that you're counting on it.
Yeah.
Give me something specific.
Right.
Now, Julie, you mentioned this earlier, but it goes for me too. You mentioned having a deadline. For me, that is very helpful in making a decision. I know that I only have so much time to figure out what I want to do, and a deadline really helps free my mind. So I'll say, one of the main questions I ask right now, when do you need to know? And that helps me. I put it on my calendar, and I know, okay, I've got 2 weeks to make this decision, and I have freedom with that.
That is very helpful for a questioner, because we will keep making decisions forever. If you haven't told us when we need to cut off the research, well, then we're not going to make a decision. Thinking about how it helps us with our family members. I mentioned that I have a rebel daughter, and she was just about graduated or moving out when I discovered this. When I found out she was a rebel, it completely diffused a lot of tension in our relationship, because what used to happen was I would want her to do something and she wouldn't be doing it. Say it's filling out your college essay. And she wouldn't be doing it. And so I would try to give a lot of reasons, like, well, you need to start on the college essay because it's due in 2 weeks and we need to have it proofread, and you want to make sure you include these 3 things, or you need to do the college essay because it's really important for this or that. And meanwhile, she's not doing anything on it, and I'm getting more and more frustrated. So I try to give more information and more reasons why, and she still doesn't do it. And finally, this made so much sense. What you need to say to the rebel is you need to say, you need to do your college essay. if you don't do your college essay by such and such deadline, you aren't going to get accepted. And then you just need to leave the choice in their hands. And they may not get accepted into a place they wanted, but you're not going to be able to convince them. The more you push, the less likely it is that they're going to do it. And it was like such a light bulb moment for me.
I guess I wonder if it, like you mentioned, their identity, if you could somehow link it to what they want to be identified as, if that would help, if because sometimes as a parent, it's hard to just total hands off, do whatever you want, that doesn't.
Right.
Right.
I think maybe that's the final thing. Like you can appeal to their identity, but I think like in the end, you have to have come to the conclusion that for the rebel, it needs to be, here's the expectation. Here's what'll happen. You choose.
Yeah. You tell them worst case scenario. If you don't do it, this could happen. And, sometimes it's, when you're driving, if you're not putting your seatbelt on, you're not watching, like you could die. I hate to say that.
Yeah.
But also like sometimes I feel like those things come out of my mouth, I mean, or you could die.
Like, let's just lay it all. I don't want it to be like, oh, you didn't have the information. As the questioner, let me just say, I told you all I could tell you.
Yes. I've
done the research and I know.
I've really had to swallow back, like my whole body will react and I'm trying to be quiet because I know it will not, it'll happen less if I continue to talk.
Right.
Too. You know what I mean? Like the chances of them not doing what I want go way down. So I know I have to be quiet. And that's where I'm like, I need to go for a walk because I'm about to explode on the inside.
Yeah. So my daughter said, well, you just, we were talking about the rebel. She goes, well, you just think I'm too dumb to figure it out. I said, no, that's not it at all. It's my instinct is, oh, someone's not doing something. They must not know why they should do it. So I spew a bunch of stuff why they should. Not that I think they just don't have the information,
Right. I will say my daughter's an obliger. And she calls me. So she's been out of the house for several years. She's married. She calls me every once in a while with a scenario that she can't seem to let go of. She knows that she can't meet an outer expectation. It's driving her insane. She doesn't know how to let it go. And she basically will explain the situation. This could be with a work situation or with a friend, whatever. And she's looking to me for permission, or how do I handle not meeting this outward expectation? And I give her freedom.
I can see that.
Yes. So she will call me and I'll say, there's nothing you can do about that. You need to let it go. You're not going to meet that outer expectation, but you need to know that this is what you're choosing. Instead, you're choosing your marriage over this work situation. So in your mind, you know that you're making the best decision for Joey, even though you're letting work down. Like you need to know that you're choosing something else and that to her is more important. And so then she was like, oh, okay. She was like, I really couldn't figure out, like, she said, this was driving me crazy.
And so prioritizing your expectation.
Helped her release meeting that or not meeting the outward expectation.
Julie, I feel like we've probably had some of these conversations on our walks. You feeling like you're letting someone down, and I'm like, well, they shouldn't have even asked that of you. You shouldn't even worry about that.
Yeah, I'll say that's their problem. That's actually not your problem. That's their problem. They need to figure it out.
Yeah. I can't think of specifics, but I'm sure you're right.
We're the bad devil saying, don't worry about that expectation.
Don't
worry about it.
Not your problem. Walk away.
Well, have you seen this play out in your family or helped you at all, Julie?
Well, like I said earlier, I don't really know what each family member is. I have an idea that I might have one of each. I don't know. But so with the obligers, just personally knowing, like giving them a deadline or encouraging them to tell other people about their commitments. And I know, Marie, you've done that with me. Make it, like, tell somebody, let them know because then they can hold you accountable. Like there was something I was wanting to do. It was weaving, learning to weave. And I remember Marie specifically saying, well, I'm going to ask you the next time we walk, did you sign up for that class? Or like I've been telling her I want to learn to play pickleball, and there's an opportunity here in our neighborhood. And she goes, well, I'm going to ask you about that the next time I talk to you.
And then I usually forget.
Well, and like I still haven't done it, but my life's a little bit more complicated than just what I want to do right now. So,
right.
But I just think that's probably because you know that about me, that I need that.
Mm-hmm. Julie, you tell me if this is helpful. I know that as a questioner and being married to an obliger, I have learned to try to protect their time a little bit because I know they'll keep saying yes to everything. And so like kid requests, I'll filter. Or like I might not tell them about this other thing that someone might want them to do. Or like, because they really will keep saying yes and yes. Do you ever feel like people take advantage of your obliger personality?
I don't know. That's one where I feel like maybe I don't fit the mold but that might just be a maturing thing, because I used to say yes to a lot of things when I was younger, and I've learned to say no. So maybe it's just because right now I can't even say yes, but it has gotten easier the older I've gotten to say no. But probably the hardest place to say no is with my kids. So I don't know. They may know that if they ask mom, it's going to get done. I don't know.
My kids always know that if they ask Steve, it's going to get done.
And this may be a little different. She talks about how a lot of people that are obligers will say, oh, if I just didn't have all these demands on me and all these expectations, and I could finally do X, like whatever that inner thing is you want to do. But it's usually not the right thing to do to get rid of those external, because the inner ones just still won't get done. Like the key is to make those inner ones external. Yeah. To make like I said, put them on the list, make them known, tell people to hold you accountable. Like it's just finding that external accountability. So I guess there's just that balance there. Obviously you can't be doing too much.
Right.
But oftentimes being resentful of all the external demands and then maybe one day getting rid of them doesn't necessarily help you meet the inner, because it's not about time. It's more about being held accountable.
Well, listeners, we hope that this has been helpful. I don't know exactly what this listener that requested this is, but maybe she matches one of us. I don't know. I would love to hear from some people that are rebels or upholders, because I really only know one rebel, my daughter. And then I do know a couple upholders. Upholders, I feel like, have the least problems in life. I feel like maybe they, or that it seems like that to other people. Like they're getting their stuff done, whether they're at work or at home, and they're doing the stuff that they need, and they're probably not making the people around them mad. Like for questioners, like maybe I'm getting my stuff done, but I might be making some people mad around me.
Right. I'll say, my two upholder people in my family really struggle with having sympathy when other people can't meet expectations.
Right.
Oh.
They're like, I don't understand.
Like, I don't understand why you can't do
that.
this. Yeah.
I know. Why wouldn't you do that? You determined it was the right thing. Like,
I think that's a weakness, is like being a little judgmental of others that don't work the same way. Yeah. Or being a little inflexible, like with the cake or
right,
the ice cream.
right. Everyone's decided to do this and they're not going along. Like it can look like a rebellious attitude.
Yeah, it was so funny because on that one podcast, Gretchen is an upholder and her sister is an obliger, and they're very close, close sisters. And that when Gretchen, who lives in New York, flies out to the West Coast to visit her sister, she stays on Eastern time. So she goes to bed at like 7:00, and there she said, I'm having a whole nother life from 7 to midnight without my sister because she's so rigid on when she goes to bed.
Right.
And she eats at 4:00 and Gretchen explained it like, hey, well, when I get back, I don't want to have to readjust. It's just better for me. And, just that inflexibility, like it seems like she's missing out on so much fun. Like this could be a fun time, but I guess that just wouldn't be fun for her if she had to
yeah.
be so inflexible.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. I have a lot of sympathy for upholders because I can get pretty rigid. Like I said, I tip towards upholders. So like if I believe in something, I will get really rigid about it. And so I can sympathize with maybe the temptation to do that, But I also can be appealed to if someone tells me like why that's not good or why we shouldn't do that or why we can give that a break for this vacation. I'm always more than open to like talking it out and reasoning it, and I can change my mind.
Yeah. What is she has a word for it, like
tightening.
With tightening, yes. Like it can be a good thing, but sometimes it can escalate and become tighter and tighter and tighter.
Right.
And turn into a bad thing.
Yeah. I'll say, I think that I helped Bryce with him being a rebel. Like I said, he's highly successful at doing things. And he's a great out of the box thinker. He always thinks of things that nobody else thinks of, and he figures out how to accomplish things. But I think it's good that I'm in his life as he's in mine to help me make decisions. And, he's not worried. He's not worried about anything. Like he quickly makes decisions and he's not concerned. He's not held in by normal expectations or standards. And you could give him a deadline and it doesn't matter. He creates the deadline or he figures out, but his way of doing things is genius to me because I don't understand how he has the freedom to do what he does. And I know that I can appeal to him because he's decided he's going to be successful in marriage, successful as a dad. And so his being a father and a good father will outweigh other things. And so I can appeal to that, when he's trying to decide, what to do. And so he very much processes out loud. And so coming to those conclusions, he's decided that's who he's going to be. At the same time, he struggles with meeting his inward expectations too. And he struggles with his health. And so he's doing a great job, but he almost has to like every day, oh yeah, I think I'm going to be that guy today and go down to the basement and work out, But it's just, like there's still things that he's learning. How do I make myself do this?
Yeah. Gretchen says that with inner expectations, the two that tend to fall off first are diet and exercise. That's the most struggled with inner expectation.
Yeah, I was driving Bryce crazy when I was getting healthy, explaining all the reasons why you should do it.
All right, listeners, you pretty much know all our mental downfalls. I don't even know if we really have time for I'm a Fan this week. But I will just say that we're all a fan of Gretchen Rubin's book, The Four Tendencies. And so I will link where you can get that because that just really does a deep dive into it.
Yeah, well, I was doing a pharmacy continuing education a couple weeks ago, and it was talking about like workplace harmony, I guess, like working in a pharmacy. And they mentioned like the Briggs-Meyer and the Enneagram, and they mentioned the Four Tendencies as a kind of a legitimate personality test. And I had never really considered it on the same level as those because those are so complex and in depth. But I do think this is maybe added to those. It adds another layer of understanding.
I can't imagine that it wouldn't be helpful in the workplace. Or they say a lot of times it's helpful like in the medical field if doctors are trying to get patients to do things. If they approach the patient according to what their tendency was, they might have more success in getting the patient to implement what they're trying to implement. And that makes so much sense. Like a lot of times the world, I think, is geared towards obligers because that's the biggest thing. And so people just tell you to do something.
Thinking you'll do it.
Yeah, thinking you'll do it. Thinking, okay, well, I'm the expert and I told them to do something, so why wouldn't they do that? And I guess that works for upholders too. So like a big portion of the population that will work for, a little over half. But for questioners and rebels, that's just not enough information. If you want to appeal to everybody, a little explanation can go a long way.
Yes. And I will say this is a whole nother topic. We didn't even delve into it. Gretchen Rubin doesn't necessarily touch on this. I don't think she does anyway. But for the believer, for the Christian, that the Bible has all tendencies. You can see them in Scripture with different, disciples and different characters in the Bible. And also, I know as a questioner, like I trust that God wants my best. And so I have trusted the author of my life. So then I adhere to the things that he tells me to do, essentially.
Yeah, because you trust the authority.
I trust the authority in the situation. And then I have faith that then whatever I'm doing, I want that to fall into line. But anyways, the whole having faith, answering questions, outward expectations, inward expectations. I think that looking at the believer is another interesting facet.
Yeah. Like maybe how pastors would present things. It could be helpful in that aspect too. So many ways that it could be helpful. It can be very helpful in parenting, the way Yeah. So listeners, we urge you to look a little bit more into this. We'd love for you to come and find us on Instagram, Midlife Matters Podcast, or you can email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. But Julie and Mindy, now I'll know how to get you guys to do things.
Oh my
no. We've given her the key.
All right. We'll talk to you next week.
All right.
Sounds great.
Bye. We're so happy you joined us today. You can find the show notes for this episode at midlifematterspodcast.com. Also, please tell a friend about the show and help them hit the free subscribe button on their favorite podcast app. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Midlife Matters Podcast. That's where we post pictures and stories about all the things we talk about in each episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.